the Pasuk Gimel in Pashas V'Eiro El Avram El Yitzchak El Yaakov B'Kel Shakai. I appeared to them with the appellation of Kel Shakai. Shakai, as the Gemara tells us in Chagiga, connotes Shekochu Dai, that God reigns in on his unlimited power, that things should happen exactly as they're meant to be, even though it's at a lesser level. We had mentioned, the Ramchal writes, usually if you have a master craftsman, whatever he creates, it demonstrates his ability. You understand, when Rembrandt paints a painting, because he's a master, it's obvious in what he produces. You see his ability, his genius. Hashem, who's infinite, the world he created is a very finite world. It could have been endlessly more, because God is unlimited. So his creation should have taken on to display that unlimited ability. But yet, the world itself is limited, very limited. Why? So the Gemara says, because the appellation of Shakai means Shekochu Dai. His power is Dai. He said enough. Although the energy would have gone at an unlimited level, he reined in on that energy, that it should manifest itself exactly as God wanted the world to be, because the world was created for the best interest of man, and the human being be created as he was, because that's in his best interest, because only God's wisdom understands that. So his energy that he released, he reined in on it, that the setting for all the challenges, which is life, is within that context. It says Kochu Dai. We had in last week's reading when Moshe Rabbeinu asked Hashem, what should I tell them? They asked me, what's your name? So it was back and forth, and afterwards it says, Zeshmi Lo'olam, this is my name forever, Lo'olam, V'zichri L'dor V'dor, but my remembrance is from one generation to another. So if you remember, Rashi in last week's reading says, the word Lo'olam is read, the Vav is deleted. Why is the Vav deleted? Because without vowels, it can be read La'aleim. That the appellation of Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, which is the four-letter name of Hashem, we don't pronounce it. It's the Torah violation. You're not permitted to pronounce that name. Even when we do say the name, it's not pronounced Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, but it's pronounced as we pronounce the name of Allah Dalu Nun Yud, Adni, like master. That's the pronunciation. So that's Shmi L'Olam, La'aleim. My name, when you say my name, it should be concealed. It should be concealed. It should not be pronounced as it's written. There's a zichri, but the zecher should be from generation to generation. It should be pronounced like master. Now, why can't the name of Hashem be pronounced? Why does the pronunciation should be concealed, la'aleim? Because what does Yud-Kei Vav-Kei represent? It represents Hoya Hovaviyah. God was, God is, and God is in the future. That concept, a finite being, even the greatest angel, as the Rambam writes, the 10 levels of angels, the greatest angel is called Chayos HaKodesh. Even the greatest angel, which is the greatest dimension of spirituality, cannot fathom God. Why? Because God being infinite and everything in creation is finite, the finite cannot fathom what the infinite is. As a result of that, when we say Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, which represents infinite, that has to be La'aleim. To understand this is something beyond anybody's capacity. This is Zichri L'Dor, but you pronounce it as master, meaning the Aleim, the infinite God is the master. Everything emanates from the master. That's the understanding. So Hashem revealed what lies within the name Kel Shakai to the Avos. That's a limited understanding of God's ability. They were not given the understanding how to perform revealed miracles like Moshe Rabbeinu did. That was rooted in the name Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. Of course, the Yud-Kei Vav-Kei represents, and what was the whole value? If we'll read later, the 10 plagues, the plagues themselves, as they manifested themselves, the first plagues were on the terrestrial level. right? Blood, lice, frogs. Then there was on the atmospheric level. Then there was on the celestial level. Every part of existence was God. Hashem displayed his mastership of everything. And then ultimately, the final was the Makas Machoros, which we discussing now in Ezer Neshech. Only God could discern between the tipa of the Bechor, the tip shein of Bechor, the droplet of semen, which is the first droplet, which caused the woman to conceive the first child of that man or not. And therefore, we had multiple people dying, even though they were children, one woman, because they were the first children of that particular person who actually brought about the impregnated the woman for that reason. So that's the total. So that's all 10 plagues that they emanate from Yud Kei Vav Kei, because that displayed Hashem's total mastership. The God is the infinite God, as we said. That the Egyptians, they believed everything is limited to the physical. Nothing exists beyond the physical. Yud Kei Vav Kei, that displays God's being infinite, and everything emanates from Hashem himself. So therefore, Ushmi Hashem lo nadati lam. You, I revealed the Shmi Hashem, not to understand what it is, but to be able to utilize it and have a grasp of what that is. So Rashi says over here, Ushmi Hashem lo nati lam, lo hudati. It doesn't say I didn't reveal the name to them. Lo nidati. Lo nikarti lem b'midas amita shali. Sholeo nikra Shmi Hashem. Of course, they knew the name Yud Kei Vav Kei. Avram Yitzchak, they knew the name Yud Kei Vav Kei. But to be able to understand it in terms of how to utilize it, Neman la'amis dvorai. Hear this? Yud Kei Vav Kei is the actual bringing what he said into fruition. Now, the promise that he promised Avraham Yitzchak Yaakov to give us the land, to be the promised people, the chosen people. Now all that is finally come to fruition. And that's through Ushmi Hashem lo nudati lohem. Hodati, yes. Ultimately, that name will bring that about. But nodati, to see the actual actualization of that they weren't made aware of. And what was it based? It was based per pure land of faith, as we'll see in a moment. Just want to point out something. The Balaturim says, Vo'era. Vo'era means I appear to Avraham Yitzchak and Yaakov. The Vav, so the Balaturim says that the word Eiro is mentioned 6 times regarding Avraham Yitzchak and Yaakov. 6 times Hashem appeared to Avraham Yitzchak and Yaakov. Vo'era, that word, Vo'era, and I appeared. That's what Hashem is saying. Although I appeared 6 times, Vav is 6, to Avraham Yitzchak and Yaakov, Shmi Hashem lo nadati lem. And the name of Hashem, I did not actualize it for them. Nevertheless, they never questioned me. I promised them and they never questioned me. You, where I allowed you to be aware of how that's going to come about, you questioned me. And this is the famous words of Chazal, which Rashi will bring in a moment. Chaval al da'avdim lo mishtachim. Woe to me of those who are no longer found, because Avraham of Yaakov, although I promised them, they didn't ask me the question. Chaval al da'avdim, although woe to me for those that are lost and we cannot locate. Though that caliber of person is no longer you, who I revealed more, you failed, and they, who I did not reveal more, they never asked the question. The level of trust and faith in me was greater than you. We'll see in a moment. And also I will establish my covenant with them, Eretz Canaan, to give them the land of Canaan, Eretz Mugureim, Asher Gorobam, the land of their sojournings, which they sojourned in. The Gamani Shamati, it's Nakas B'nei Yisrael, Hashem Mitzrayim Avidim Osam, and I heard the outcries of the Jewish people as the Egyptians are enslaving them. The Esker is Prisi, and due to that, and remembered my covenant. Now, this is very interesting. Because I heard their outcries, therefore, as they are enslaving them, therefore I remembered my bris. Rashi, v'gam koshi tzavti marti brisi yesholai l'kayim fido shamati esplis anokim Hashem Mitzrayim avidim osam ve'etzkor osa bris. That bris, that covenant which I made with Avram, osa bris ki bris bein absorum marti. In the covenant between the parts, I had said, the nation that will enslave the Jews, I will judge them. Now, therefore tell the Jewish people, Ani Hashem, I am Hashem, Yud Vav Kei. Meaning now, will all come to fruition. Votsesi, these are the four expressions of redemption. Votsesi osa eschem mitachas sivlos mitzrayim. I will take them out from under the sufferings of the Egyptians. Vitzalti osam eschem yavodosam. You'll be extricated from their work, from their enslavement. V'go'alti eschem b'zroat tuya, and I will redeem you with that outstretched arm, u'b'shvatim gedolim, with great judgment against the Egyptians. And this is the ultimate, which is Sinai, and I will take you to me as the people. So it's a double-sided relationship. I will take you as my people, and I will be your God. And then, which is Sinai, and you will know that I am Hashem, your God, who took you out from under the sufferings of Egypt. I just want to get back to, I heard the cries of the Bnei Yisrael that the Egyptians, mavidim osam, they were actually enslaving them. The enslavement, the Eskor Esbrisi. It mentioned yesterday the name of the Vilna Gaon and name of Chassam Sofer that initially was supposed to be in Egypt 400 years. But because the Jews, if we would have been there more than 210 years, we were holding the 49th level of spiritual purity, we would have gone into the oblivion. Hashem took us out 190 years earlier. But the question is, we have to reconcile something which Hashem had said. He said, you will be in a state of enslavement for 400 years. But if we're there for 210, how do we reconcile with the number 400? So the commentators explain that the whole concept of Yimoru Chayim, the embitterment of our lives, the intensification of that bondage, although quantitative, it was only 210, it was the equivalent of 400. And that's why the Tamei Mikra, the cantillation on the word Vayimor Chayim is Kadma V'Azlo. Kadma V'Azlo, so the Vilna Gaon says, the word Kadma V'Azlo means earlier you will go out. And the numerical value of Kadma V'Azlo is 190. Meaning because of Yimor Chayim, that's why you're going out 190 years before the 400 years, because that compensates for the 400. The 200 is the equivalent of 400. That's the Vilna Gaon. Chassam Sofer says the cantillation, the tune of the cantillation of Vayimor Chayim, usually the tune indicates the tone of what's happening at that moment. Vayimor Chayim is the most painful moment, the embitterment of the lives, and yet the cantillation is the cantillation of joy and ecstasy. The answer is because of that, we went out early. Because of Yimor Chayim, that's why we went out 190 years earlier. So if you read the Pasuk, Ani Shamati es Nakas Bnei Yisrael, I heard the outcries. What was the outcries? Not just we were in servitude, we were in enslavement, we were in a state of embitterment, our lives were embittered. Hashem Mitzrayim avidim osam, the Egyptians are enslaving us. That's why there's going to be. Why did I remember the covenant 190 years before it was meant to be remembered, which is the Gula? It's only because Hashem Mitzrayim avidim osam, because the Egyptians are enslaving us, and there was the intensification of that bondage. Therefore, Veskor is brisi. Therefore, I remembered my bris before the 400-year period, only after 210 years. Okay. But factually speaking, We'll see in a moment. And this is Reb Shimon Yochai, who's the author of the Zohar, writes that since we were meant to be in Egypt, enslavement for 400 years, and although we were there for only 210 years, there's a balance to be paid. We weren't fully expunged of that evil or that deficiency, which was meant to be corrected through 400 years of being in bondage. And therefore, we have to have the 4 exiles: the Babylonian exile, the Persian exile, the Greek exile, and ultimately the Edomite exile. That's to pay the balance of the 190. This is Rav Shimon Yochai, because we were meant to be there 400 years. Because Rav Shimon Yochai has a question. When we speak about exiles, how many exiles are there? The Daled Godusim. There are 4 exiles. So Rav Shimon Yochai asked, the Zohar asked, seemingly there should be 5. The Egyptian exile is not counted as one of the exiles. We only speak about the 4. Why don't we speak about 5? So he answers, because the exile is really the Egyptian exile. That we experienced, those that followed, that was an extension of the Egyptian exile. That was the payment of the balance of the debt, which we didn't pay the debt fully in Egypt. Therefore, we have to go through the 4 other exiles to pay off the debt. That's the Zohar. That's Shimon Yochai in the Zohar. So if you take a look over here at the Balaturim, each one of the expressions of redemption, Votseisi, Vogaalti, Velokachti, Vogaalti, Velokachti, if you look at the Balaturim, he says, each one of these expressions of redemption correspond to each one of the exiles. Votseisi corresponds to Golus Bovil, to the Babylonian exile. V'goalti is the Persian exile. V'lokachti, V'tzalti is the Persian. V'goalti is the Greek exile. V'otseisi, I will take them out. That's the Edomite exile. And he says something interesting. The word V'lokachti, I will take. Meaning the longest exile we've experienced is the Edomite exile. It's over 2,000 years since the destruction of Beis HaMikdash. Edom is not willing to let go. Not willing to let go. And if you remember, we had mentioned a medrash when Yaakov was in the Har Moriah, and he had seen the angels ascending and descending. So he saw every one of the angels, which represented one of the exiles. They went up so many rungs, then they came down. The archangel of Edom, when he began ascending that ladder, he didn't come down. And Yaakov was terrified when he saw this. It seems to me it's unlimited. Hashem says to Yaakov, if he doesn't come down, I will take him down. That's what Hashem says to Yaakov in the prophecy on the Har Moriah. So over here, the Baal HaTurim says, V'lokachti, even if I have to wrench you out of the hands of Edom, that's the connotation of lokachti, I will take you. Even if I have to wrench you out, I will wrench you out. Because Edom is not giving up so easy. They're not giving you, letting you go so easy. So that's lokachti is the ultimate. This is when the world will reach its level of perfection. And that's then I will be the God, which means then forever the world will reach its level of perfection. And then there will no longer be any questions that I took you out of Egypt. What was the taking out of Egypt? That was the whole idea, is to extract you from that impurity. So then you'll have full appreciation of what it means to be totally purged from the impurity of Egypt, and that will be which will be at the end of time. No. When we were going through the Red Sea, and it says, the water was a wall to the right and to the left. And we're walking between these walls of water which were towering above us. And it says, Choma means a wall. But the way the word Choma is spelled, it's spelled with the Vav deleted. So without vowels, it can be read Hachema. The Chema, the wrath of Hashem, was to the right and the left of us. What does that mean? So the Midrash says, when we're going through the Red Sea, and the angels come to Hashem and say, why are you destroying? Why are the Egyptians going to be destroyed in the sea? The Jews are no less culpable. As the Egyptians are idolaters, the Jews are idolaters. So Hashem says to the angels, but there's one big difference. The Egyptians are idolaters by choice. The Jews, because they were enslaved. And a slave is influenced by his master, because the master controls the slave's life, every aspect of his life. Therefore, they're vulnerable to all the beliefs and behavior patterns of the master. So therefore, their slavery, they're not culpable for being idolaters. But the Egyptians, that it was their choice, because they're the masters, therefore they will be destroyed, and the Jews are not going to be destroyed. So what was the cause of the idolatry? It was the enslavement. Because we were enslaved, but that enslavement was only because it reached a level they didn't let us breathe. We had no moment. Even at the end, what did Paro say? We will increase the workload because they have too much time to think. If a person has time to think, there's a problem. You can make an evaluation. When you have no time to think, then you just keep going. In what direction? In the direction that the master dictates. That was the level of enslavement in Egypt. That was the avodah koshtet tzimor chayim. Therefore, the Egyptians are culpable for what happened to us. Therefore, they were destroyed in the sea, and we were not destroyed in the sea for that reason. Okay, but that's Chazal. That's a medrash, what I'm telling you now. So the idolatry that we had, that microscopic cell, that trace of idolatry we had, was due to what the Egyptians did to us. Therefore, ultimately, and that's why Sinai failed. That's why it was Chet HaEgel, the only cause of that. So why did the world not reach a level of perfection of Sinai? At Sinai, do you know why? Because of what the Egyptians had done to us. So all God's glory, which did not happen, was attributed to what the Egyptians had done to us. Therefore, we had that vulnerability to idolatry, and we failed. Of course, it was our choice. But ultimately, if you trace it back to the source, it goes back to the Egyptians.